Welcome to There's No Place Like Home, the radio show coming to you on WRXB 1590 AM and Pinellas County Connection TV. This program is presented to you as an opportunity to hear information that can help you fulfill the dream of owning your very own home. We also share information about upcoming special events and programs to help you enjoy the good life in Pinellas County, as well as other items of interest. The sponsor of this program is the Housing Finance Authority of Pinellas County, which offers the First-Time Homebuyers Program, your key to home ownership, helping people in Pinellas, Pasco, and Polk counties make their dreams of home ownership a reality. I'm Frank Bowman, alongside Jane Merlin, your host for today's show. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning, Frank, and how are you today?
I'm doing very, very well.
Great. Well, we're talking. We always talk about home ownership on this program, and I don't think anything is probably more important than today's topic, and that is fair housing.
That's very, very true. And it's an issue that a lot of people think is not that prevalent anymore, but we'll find that it truly is still a very important issue that people need to be aware of and pay attention to.
Absolutely. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Leon Russell. He's the director of the Office of Human Rights for Pinellas County, and Mark Esparza, who is the housing manager, also with the Office of Human Rights. But before we get into our subject matter today, Frank, I know that you've got an update from our sponsor, the Housing Finance Authority.
That's true, Jane. The Housing Finance Authority, or the HFA, is offering its first-time homebuyers program for individuals in Pinellas, Pasco, and Polk counties who have never owned a home, have not owned a home in the last 3 years, or who are veterans. The HFA offers a low rate on its 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, and if you need a little help with down payment and closing costs, they can help you with that too with the Home Key Second Mortgage available in Pinellas and Polk counties. The interest rate for the Home Key Second is an unbelievable 0%, and you don't have to pay the money back until you sell, transfer the property, or refinance. To get your key to home ownership, call 727-464-8210 or visit our website at www.pinellascounty.org/community/HFA. Jane?
Thank you, Frank. And what a great program and some great opportunities for people to get into home ownership at some low interest rates currently and some great assistance with down payment.
And that down payment assistance is even more important than ever in today's financing market. So,
well, it's one of the things that sometimes prevents people from getting a home. They can afford the monthly mortgage payment, but they can't come up with quite enough money down. But we can help with that. So, well, it's my pleasure now to welcome both of our guests to the program. Leon Russell, again, is the director of the Office of Human Rights, and Mark Esparza, housing manager with Office of Human Rights. And I guess we should say welcome back to There's No Place Like Home. You were kind enough to join us last year and talk about this exciting topic, so welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back. It's always good to come and talk about fair housing and talk about what the Office of Human Rights does, and so we're glad to be here this morning.
Well, let's start there, Leon. Let's first talk about what does the Office of Human Rights do for the residents of Pinellas County?
Probably one of the most unknown offices to some people, but we have a multitude of responsibilities within county government. First, we have the responsibility for enforcement of the Pinellas County Human Rights Ordinance, which prohibits discrimination in housing, employment, and in places of public accommodation, so that a private citizen who feels that they've been discriminated against in one of those three areas has the ability to come into our office and file a complaint. We would investigate it and determine whether or not discrimination has occurred. We would attempt to mediate between the parties, and if necessary, in some instances, we will go into a hearing with the Department of Administrative Hearings out of Tallahassee, and an administrative law judge will make a determination which is enforceable in a court of law. And particularly in housing cases, we have the ability to give the charging party who we find cause enough information to go into court to seek redress under Title VIII of the Federal Fair Housing Act. So that's one area. We also have responsibility internally within Pinellas County government for equal employment opportunity and civil rights compliance. So, first of all, any county employee who believes that they've been the victim of employment discrimination for some reason, race, sex, whatever the case may be, they have the ability to come to our office, and we would again investigate that complaint and work with the appointing authority to correct whatever situation that would be there. We also have a responsibility within county government to ensure compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which ensures that anybody who is a citizen of Pinellas County has the right to participate in the programs or activities of Pinellas County. So, for instance, one of the things we do a lot is talk about how the Pinellas County Communication Department delivers its content so that people who may be deaf or need some other format may be able to use those things. We're also responsible for accessibility to the court system. So we look at how our court facilities handle issues of accessibility. We discuss and work with them on making sure that people who have a hearing impairment are able to hear within the system. We also deal with all of the other programs so that people who, let's say, are customers of Health and Human Services, so that they're ensured that their services are out there and appropriately available for people with a disability or people because of their individual participation or membership in a group.
Boy, that's an unbelievable array of services that you're providing. How many folks do you have in your offices to handle these cases?
There are 10 of us. 5 of our folks are investigators. They are engaged in investigating complaints of employment discrimination, housing discrimination, or discrimination in places of public accommodations. And I ought to mention that our enforcement effort is a dual role for us. We enforce the county human rights ordinance, which for employers extends down to employers with 5 or more employees. We also enforce the federal Fair Housing Act and the federal Equal Employment Opportunity Act, or Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which prohibits employment discrimination. So when you hear people saying that they might file a complaint with the EEOC, that complaint, if it's handled in Pinellas County, would probably be handled by our office.
So it actually goes to your office before it makes its way to Tallahassee?
Well, before it makes its way to Tampa or Miami in the case of the EEOC.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
And how many cases do you typically get in a year? I know it's different every year, but for example, this past year, how many cases did you all handle?
We will probably see in the nature of 2,000 or 3,000 inquiries, first of all, people calling up and saying, I believe that something has happened to me that might be discrimination. Is it discrimination? In most of those instances, it's not, and we can refer them to some other agency. In terms of actual complaints that we will scrub down and make a determination on, we'll receive 400 or 500 that really do require some type of work to determine whether or not discrimination has actually occurred, and then we'll engage. Say in housing, we typically look at between 40 and 65, 70 cases that are real cases of discrimination in housing. In employment, we'll look at another probably 200 to 300 that scrub back to being actual cases.
That's a huge caseload. And
as I mentioned earlier, one would expect in this day and age that this would not be as prominent a problem, but it certainly is. We like to bring your office and your function to the attention of our listeners and viewers because it is a very important topic that still goes on, and we do this during April every year. Right. And we do that because April is essentially Fair Housing Month. What's the history on how April was assigned to be Fair Housing? April
became Fair Housing Month because if you go back to 1968, the Federal Fair Housing Act had been proposed at the end of 1964, but it had faced filibusters for like 3 years during that time and had not been passed. April 4th, of course, is the anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And it happens that in 1968, following the assassination of Dr. King, the Fair Housing Act, the original Fair Housing Act, was actually passed in less than 2 weeks after that assassination, and as a direct result of the kind of rioting and reaction to the assassination of Dr. King. And so April has become the anniversary of the Fair Housing Month and the appropriate time then to recognize what we need to do with regard to housing discrimination.
And how is Fair Housing Month highlighted or recognized here in Pinellas or in the Bay Area?
And we do it Bay Area. We're kind of unique in that we have several city and county agencies in the Bay Area between Hillsborough and Pinellas, and we try to work together on doing Fair Housing Month. So we will alternate between Pinellas and Hillsborough each year doing fair housing seminars to inform providers, prospective home seekers, anybody who manages housing, anybody who's involved with the sale or rental of housing and the development of housing. We try to do a program that educates them on fair housing responsibilities and rights every year. And so this year, on April 8th, we will be at the Egypt Temple Shrine Activities Hall over in Tampa on Dana Shores 4050 Dana Shores Drive, where we will be doing an all-day seminar talking about a number of fair housing issues. We'll talk about basic non-discrimination issues in fair housing. We'll talk about the responsibilities of realtors. We'll talk about what's going on with foreclosures. We'll talk about how people who need assistance with modifications and reasonable accommodations to make their homes livable. We'll talk about how they can get assistance here in the Bay Area. We'll talk about a number of subjects that touch on fair housing.
And it sounds like those presentations will be geared towards both folks who might be subject to fair housing violations and those that have to take necessary steps to avoid creating violations. So
that's absolutely correct. What we find is that there is room for education across the board. People who are seeking housing need to know what their rights are, but people who are providing housing, managing housing, responsible in some way for housing decisions need to know what their responsibilities are.
Are we finding a number of fair housing issues here in Pinellas County, or is there a pretty good track record? I mean, you mentioned earlier the total number of cases. How many of those are related to fair housing?
For us, that's that 100 to 200 that we scrub down to 60 or 70 in the end that are actual cases of discrimination. Now let Mark sort of give us an overview of what that kind of consists of in the county.
What some of the cases that we're encountering as we proceed, I find that a lot of the cases will reflect sometimes the demographics of the area. Here in Pinellas County, we have a lot of 55-pluses. We get a lot of those complaints.
What's a 55-plus?
Well, that would be housing for senior persons, for older persons. Those are the persons that would be legally able to deny housing to children if they meet certain criteria under the federal laws. We also get a lot of cases. Probably our largest source of cases involves disability-related complaints, whether somebody needs a caregiver, whether somebody needs a service animal of some sort, whether somebody needs a curb cut or a grab bar, or to that extent in their housing provider, at their premises over there. So we see a lot of cases like that primarily.
And those are usually in rental housing settings or sometimes
Yes.
ownership housing too? Or?
It comes across, the Fair Housing Act will govern a lot of many different types of transactions. You have rental apartments, you have homeowners associations, mobile home parks, condominiums. They're all going to be jurisdictional under the Fair Housing Act. And what will happen many times is that you will have a community that will be age qualified, or they will say no pets. And you will have somebody who, because of their particular disability, can benefit from from having a service animal, whether it's going to be a CNI dog or if it's going to be for some sort of other cognitive type impairment. It just depends on the situation, depends on the disability. And so many times you'll have a dispute or a struggle with the housing provider, and they have their own legitimate questions about why somebody would need an exception to the rules. And so that's typically when we get involved. People will have a dispute and they will file a complaint about it.
Right. One area I think, Frank, that is really significant for us is what happens when a person may need a caregiver. We get a lot of complaints about folks who are older, who may have developed some kind of serious illness, who will need somebody to come into the home, particularly in rental housing situations. And they're not a part of the lease. They were never intended to be a permanent resident, but this individual may need that caregiver. And so there's a lot of interaction about how we deal with caregivers. And so that comes to us as well.
And so these are the people who actually have to remain living in the home as the caregiver?
They are, at least for some extended period of time.
Yeah. It really depends on the situation. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might have some persons that just do the help with the shopping or with the cleaning, and other persons might have to live there just for medications, for showering, for cooking, and all the other daily activities that somebody might not be able to do because of their particular disability. It really depends.
And what are the consequences for a housing management organization violating these laws? And how do most of these kinds of complaints, how do they resolve, or what's the outcome?
Well, I'd say that most of them resolve amicably, in a sense. We offer mediation right up front before we proceed with our investigation, just to see if the parties can work it out themselves. Many times in this type of confidential and voluntary setting, in a mediation setting, parties can talk it through, talk about their issues, and reach an agreement. That's a win-win for both sides. If it cannot, and it has to go to a determination, we will make a determination. We stay neutral during the whole process. At the end, we will get off the fence and make a decision about it. If we believe that discrimination occurred, basically the result is going to be another meeting to see if we can resolve the matter, and then secondly, it will go to litigation, and then the outcome will, if the plaintiff prevails, will be just civil damages.
So essentially, some sort of fine or payment to the person who experienced the discrimination.
Can be a range of penalties dependent on how egregious a situation is. For instance, if a provider violates the law 2 or 3 times, then HUD may decide that that requires a significant penalty in the law. A lot of times when we look at cases as well, depending on the individual damages, how long, what kind of emotional distress it's caused, it can be a fairly substantial damages award, civil damages award that comes out of a case like this. So the best result is that one where we have the opportunity to mediate and work out an amicable settlement between the parties.
What is the impact to the individual who has been affected by a fair housing issue? And I guess I would also ask, what's the impact to the community?
Well, I think there are several kinds of things that can happen. Most immediately, there is the mental anguish that discrimination causes, and that can develop into physical illness. It can manifest in numerous ways. In terms of the community, you can create a situation where there's intergroup tension, problems between individuals who live in a particular community because of the situation that's out there that can lead to further and further kinds of escalation. So you want to nip those kinds of things in the bud, but basically you're dealing with individual kinds of issues, loss of income, the actual loss of housing, deprivation of housing, the inability of a person who is disabled to effectively utilize the housing that they have because they've been denied the right to make a modification or a reasonable accommodation in order to get there. One of the things I think that we need to always think about Pinellas County is the demographics, as Mark said earlier. We have in our community a number of people who have disabilities. We have people who have hearing impairments. Approximately 35 to 40,000 people in this community, in this county, have some type of hearing impairment. So there's all kinds of things that people are deprived of just in terms of their ability to enjoy their housing.
That's pretty significant. I had no idea that we had that kind of number in Pinellas County. Walk us through the process of somebody who feels like they may have experienced a violation. Who do they contact, and what are the steps that one has to go through?
Sure. The first step, if somebody feels that they've been subjected to an unfair housing transaction, would be to contact the department. They will go through the intake process in which they will specify the allegations, and we will scrub it and ask for witnesses, comparative information, the location of the property. And we fashion that into a complaint form that's going to be signed by the charging party or the complainant that's served on the other side, on the housing provider, who at that point is they set forth their position in the matter. Now, that is, once it's received by the department, we offer mediation, but we also present the respondent's answer to the charging party, to the complainant, who has the burden at that point of showing pretext that the respondent's answer is not true and that their assertion of discrimination is true. It's kind of it really depends on the case. If we have if we have a direct evidence type case, well, you're going to be looking for the types of witnesses or the documents. And if you have an indirect type of evidence case, you're going to be looking for more comparisons and contextual type information. And so that would be, and then roughly at the end of the process, after we have to make a decision, after we've interviewed the witnesses and looked at all the records that are going to be relevant and applicable, we make a decision at that point. And if there's reason to believe that discrimination occurred, we will issue a letter stating such and then proceed.
I think we should go ahead and give the phone number that people can contact if they have an issue, or
Absolutely.
Email or website.
Well, the phone number is 727-464-4880. That's 727-464-4880, and they should ask for our intake person, and they will be connected immediately. They can also go online to the Pinellas County website and look for us under departments, the Office of Human Rights. They can go to our website, www.pinellascounty.org/human rights, and they will find an area on there that talks about housing discrimination. They click on that particular link, and they will find a form that they can fill out and send to us by email. But it's usually we get them by telephone or walk-in. And, of course, we're located in County Annex at 400 South Fort Harrison, right on the 5th floor here in Clearwater.
And also, let me just add one thing. Citizens can also file directly with HUD, and HUD will forward the complaint to our offices for investigation.
Oh, okay, great. We talked earlier a little bit about persons who are 55 years plus, and we know that there are a number of communities that are specifically for that particular age group. And we sometimes hear in the news of a situation where a child is now been placed in that home. What are the ramifications of that for that community? Can a person be precluded from being within that community because they are under 55?
I'll let Mark get into this a little bit more, but I want to make sure that there is housing for older persons under the law. And then we have protection for familial status, which is for children or families that have minor children in their home or who are obtaining custody of minor children. And so that can include adoptions, pregnancies, those kinds of things that have to be watched. And so Mark can sort of expound then on.
We do see those situations here in the county, and for the most part, if you have a 55 plus and you have a grandson move in with the grandparents, because that's a dynamic that we do see some days in society where the parents themselves might be unable to care for the children, and so what you'll have is that you'll have the association, if it's a age qualified area, not want the child there, and a lot of times you see that they'll give the person some times. In those types of cases, the age qualification will usually prevail. But you have other situations in which, let's say that the grandson has some sort of disability, in which that the grandparents might be the only or the best persons in the whole area to be able to better take care of that particular family member and that particular disability. And so in those types of cases, an accommodation request can be made by the grandson, by the grandparents, to the association, asking that they waive the application of the age rule to them as an exception due to the presence of the disability. But those are fact-specific types of issues that we look into. And but those are the types of situations that we have seen and that do arise here in the county.
Right. And the caregiver situation that we talked about earlier is one of those instances that impacts housing for older persons in the 55 and over kinds of situations, where the person is actually 55 or older, but they need somebody, and it may be a younger child or somebody else to come in and be their live-in caregiver. So those kinds of things require a request for reasonable accommodation in order to take care of them.
And do you all still participate in what I guess would be referred to as a mystery shopper kind of investigation technique, where if you've heard complaints about a specific rental community or perhaps a hotel-motel situation where people have reported discrimination, how would you go about investigating that to see if those conditions are in place?
We have situations where we are maybe informed that a particular complex or project is excluding people because of their race or their national origin, or they're treating people differently because of sex or whatever, or they're segregating people because of their disabilities or something like that. We would, in fact, do what we call testing in some of those instances. We don't have an ongoing testing program, but we generally would test where there's a question about an illegal practice that may be occurring. So we might do some testing to determine whether or not that is actually happening. That reminds me, we probably need to let folks know that our ordinance and the Fair Housing Law cover race and color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and handicap or disability. And in Pinellas County, exclusive to our particular ordinance, we cover sexual orientation in housing. So people who feel that they're being treated differently because of any of those particular areas would need to call us.
Great information this morning, as always, and I can't believe that we are already out of time. But before we let you go, please give us the phone number one more time for people.
727-464-4880.
And I want to thank our guests, Leon Russell and Mark Esparza with Pinellas County's Office of Human Rights. We also want to thank our communications department and, of course, our friends at WRXB 1590 AM. Be sure to join us again next month, and our topic is going to be the upcoming Hope Expo. That is homeownership for people everywhere, Frank, and that is a great event, kind of one-stop shopping for people who are interested in buying a home. You'll hear from lenders and realtors and title companies, everything A to Z, kind of puts the puzzle pieces together for those of us who might be in the market of getting a new home. You'll have all of your questions answered. And the icing on the cake is the fact that you can actually take the home buyer education class and get your certificate, which is needed for some of the programs that we have in the county in order to get that down payment assistance that we talked about earlier. So,
and most lenders now, if you're applying for a mortgage, they look more favorably on your application if you have had that home buyer training program. So
yeah, I wish that I had taken it myself.
Yes,
yeah.
It's great.
So be sure to tune in next month where we talk about the Hope Expo. And remember, you can view past shows on the county's website at pinellascounty.org, and you can even find us on YouTube. And I think we're actually going to also put today's show on human rights on the Office of Human Rights website. So be looking for that too. I'm Jane Merlin.
And I'm Frank Bowman.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And remember, there's no place like home.